Welcome back to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game. With every conversation, we hope to inspire as many as possible to keep on Dungeon Mastering.
And I'm one of your hosts, DM Neal, aka Joke Maniac.
And I'm one of your other hosts, DM Derrick, aka How Not to DM. And on today's episode, we are super excited to chat with our friend Zachary Burrell, who is a Louisville-based actor, photographer, and also the writer and producer of the audio drama podcast, Warlock.
And today we're going to be talking about adding a little bit of anime flair to your D&D games. And I have expressly said it that way because the idea is like we are not trying to do a one-for-one comparison to any anime directly. We are not trying to appropriate anything. We are trying to go for the generalized feel of what anime invokes in us, what we have felt like as children back in the Toonami days, what I think of when my kids are excited watching anime now, just trying to get the vibes while still holding to a truly D&D game. Because if you truly want to play anime while rolling those math rocks, there are definitely way better games to do it, and it is not this one. So it is, again, the anime flair in D&D.
Before we get to the meat today, though, we've got another 5-star review to read from our friend Lauren Amberly00 on Podchaser. Lauren says, as someone who has very low confidence and is quite new to dungeon mastering, I decided to try and learn as much as I could to get a grasp on things. Of every resource I have come across, this podcast offers the most robust yet consumable advice that is applicable for all styles of gameplay. They are so helpful and fun to listen to on my commute to work. My games wouldn't be nearly as consistent without the assurance of seasoned veterans / enthusiasts on this pod giving such in-depth, versatile advice. Thank you, everyone at DM's Block, for making my commute and my games that much better.
Well, first and foremost, I bestow upon you easily the title of DM Lauren. Let's just forevermore carry that title with honor, with pride, and yeah, hopefully. Also, I just want to let everyone know your players can't see what you roll behind the DM screen. Just keep that in mind.
Oh boy!
Never forget, everyone. They can't see what you roll.
Don't open that can of worms. I love that you have given Lauren the forever title of DM. I think she's definitely earned it, but also, that's why we do the show, really. Like, knowing that there are people out there who are getting something out of it, and she said her game's more consistent, and that's really all I can ask for. Amazing.
I can say with confidence, and I know that it has become a guiding light, like if we were to have a mission statement, and I know that Mitch and Chris, from the very start of this, it is to inspire people to keep on dungeon mastering. Like, that has become our guiding light moving forward and has always been what this show is about. It's about inspiring ourselves as much as anyone else. And in doing so, like through our inspiration, our hope is to inspire others to start. And because it is such a tough task, to keep going. And that is why we start every episode and end every episode with those 4 magical words: keep on dungeon mastering.
But without further ado, let us head to the meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meat?
The plate meat's back on the menu, boys.
And today we are chatting with Zachary Burrell, a Louisville-based actor, photographer, and he is also the writer and producer of the podcast Warlock, a D&D audio drama. Welcome to the show, Zachary. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me on. Very excited.
Today we're going to be talking about another episode in our class feature. No, I'm super kidding. It just dawned on me like how funny that would be to just have you on to talk about the Warlock, which we're absolutely not doing. We may have you.
I mean, I do love the
later,
Warlock,
but
I mean, you must, right? Like the show premise, which I'm not going to spoil. I'll let you give people kind of a teaser as to what the show's about. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into tabletops.
So I think I probably started back in middle school. I was hanging out at a friend's house. His dad had his friends over, curious, are you all playing a board game? What are you doing? He's like, oh, we're playing D&D. Do you want to just sit in and watch? I'm like, yeah, sure. Hooked immediately. He let us roll up characters and he ran a campaign for us for probably about a year. And then my friend was like, I'm going to DM. And so he pretty much just DM'd me and two other kids in middle school. And I was just hooked since. Ran games in high school, ran games in college, played in a couple games in college, and then took a break. Got hooked back into it for Severed Sons, the other D&D podcast I'm a part of. And then that kind of spiraled into me playing more and more. So yeah, I've been, on and off playing for probably 20 years. Maybe a little bit more, 25 years.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
So you were doing tabletops and stuff before you got into acting and that kind of stuff then?
Yes. It's fun that it kind of, I found out, a lot of actors also enjoy playing D&D.
Yeah.
I found that out in college. College is kind of where I got into theater the most. I dabbled a little bit in high school, especially going to smaller schools. We had the school play where pretty much everyone was involved, but in college is where I really got into it and found out that the two skills lend itself to each other,
Yeah, they do. They do a lot.
So much of D&D is just long form improv, and those are good skills to have as an actor. So it just naturally kind of leads into one or the other.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I've been doing some improv classes just because I felt like it was time to dip my toes in, and it's been a lot of fun. It's very different because I'm doing short form. And so, it's very like, keep it snappy, but I'll get there.
Right. It's good skill. It's a good skill to have just in life. Just one, kind of having that confidence of not feeling afraid to be in front of other people and not being afraid to feel goofy in front of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with acting and with improv. You have to be fearless in a sense of not being afraid to look cringe, as the youth say.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
Being afraid of being cringe is cringe. So yeah, that's, I feel like a lot of when you're playing D&D, you want to commit. You don't want to be half into something. You don't want to be tentative in either combat or the role play portions of it. So yeah, I feel like that confidence kind of follows through.
I agree.
Yeah, a half-delivered line, I think, with most of the things that we repeat from our D&D tables is probably not going to land as well as a fully delivered line. Because, yeah, the things that are repeated from a D&D table out of context without the full level of commitment, as they were said, probably don't work as well.
Right.
But, so for our next question, is there anything that you're currently working on, and as always, that you can tell us about?
Well, I just today put the finishing touches on the season 3 finale of Warlock. We're Severed Sons, the other podcast I mentioned, is doing an actual play of Rime of the Frost Maiden, and we are approaching the end of that. Other than that, tabletop wise, that's it. We're kind of tinkering. Another one of the Warlock Patreon members who have kind of collaborated with to make a supplement for D&D. We're kind of tinkering, starting the next phases of doing the 2024 D&D version of our supplement. So yeah, just a couple things.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, Warlock is an audio drama, so it's not an actual play where you're rolling dice to kind of see what happens. You and some of the other cast members, you're writing a script, but you're using the framework of D&D and kind of like the class ideas and some of the spells and stuff to inform like the flavor of the story and kind of how everyone interacts. So yeah, kind of, like you said, you've made a supplement with a bunch of subclasses for all the different types of sorcerers specifically and a warlock that you've got in your world. So yeah, kind of give us a little bit of a taste of what Warlock's about.
So my friend Claire, who is also part of Severed Sons, we kind of had this conversation years ago now about how the Warlock class is kind of very anime, especially if you are a fan of My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen. It's the kind of the idea of a underdog, regular person, all of a sudden getting this amazing power from someone else. And we kind of, as we were playing our actual play, we were like, well, wouldn't it be fun if we made like an actual play about a warlock that is very anime inspired? And then as that evolved, that became just straight up audio drama. We thought, let's just control every aspect of it so we can tell the story we want to tell.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically it is a story about a girl who wants to be a powerful magic user, but in the world that she lives in, only people that are born with magic can use magic. There is no wizard. There is no cleric. So she ends up making a bargain with a mysterious woman and she gains magical power. And it's this twisting story of why she was chosen to wield this power, what she's going to do with it, what her family is involved with it. So I don't want to spoil too much, but we kind of riff off of the sorcerer class and we've made some kind of fun variations on it. We're kind of branching out in the third season.
Yeah. I just caught up last night driving home from my home game. So we'll probably chat about that after the recording. I really loved the idea. Like you said, within the very first couple episodes, it introduces that idea. And it was just such a fun twist on the warlock. And I loved that anime twist because you're absolutely right. It's just fun to think of a warlock like that. Like, okay, what would drive someone to want that kind of ability? And there's a lot of good kind of anime tropes and ideas that you can use to inform like that character choice. Like, oh yeah, they would want to do this because of X, Y, and Z. So it was a really fun idea. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun to listen to.
And anime kind of has, especially shonen anime has that signature attack.
Right.
The shonen anime characters all have a signature attack. And that's kind of the warlock class kind of lends itself to that as well, where it's like you pick your leveled cantrip, and for warlock, we had to go with the Eldritch Blast, but we've made it radiant and called it the Astral Beam.
Yep. Astral Beam. Yeah.
It's our Kamehameha.
Yeah, it is. It's really fun.
So for our surprise question, if you could choose an anime that you were forced to be an isekai into, which anime would it be? This is a tricky. Weird little bit of a snake eating its tail. You get it. If you were forced into an anime world, which one would it be?
I might have to go classic Dragon Ball Z. They've really laid out that even just with enough hard work, human characters can be like demigods, because Krillin he's a human being that manages to keep up with super powered aliens. And so, if I'm isekai'd into training with Goku and Gohan, Piccolo, they could teach me something, I'm sure.
Probably.
Teach me to fly, at least.
Yeah, that would be sweet.
They taught Videl how to fly in one episode. I could pick it up.
Probably.
Maybe take 2 episodes, but I'll get there.
This might be a slight cop-out answer, but if Ghibli's an anime, which I think it is, I'm going to choose Kiki's Delivery Service every day of the week. I just want to live in that town, in that cozy town, and see a little girl flying around on a broom every once in a while. Like that's what I want to live. I'm kind of a conflict averse, risk averse person. So that's where I'd go. I mean, I suppose something bad could happen at the end there, but anyway, yep, that's my choice.
I mean, you could always take a lighter role. I always think about like the guy in Sword Art Online who's just like, I just fish, man.
Or the blacksmith guy.
Dungeons. Yeah.
Who's like, I just got really good at making swords.
Role for this world. Yeah. and I catch the best fish, and it's a required material component for you to eat so that you can go into the dungeon. I'd give old Space Cowboy, old Cowboy Bebop a try.
Wow. I mean, that's a good answer. Fly around the galaxy or the solar system. Yeah, that would be fun. It would be fun to go visit all those moons of Jupiter and Saturn.
The cold vacuum of space killing me, but
don't commit crime or go into debt or anything. So,
yeah.
You're not killed in cold blood. Anyway.
And notice how none of us said Evangelion or
yeah,
like
yeah, you know,
nobody went.
There's
post-apocalypse.
so many bad options.
Neal,
I
get on the robot.
suppose, one of them is from the United States, so maybe our country would be around in some form in Evangelion, you know? Anyway. But I guess it depends on which ending you decide is the canon for your world,
which
that
one
you
you
get isekai into as well, right? Anyway. Oh, that was one of the first animes I watched, and I was like, I don't know if this is for me. But, you know, it's okay. I pushed through, and here we are.
It's a rough place to start.
It was.
I went from there. I think that was my first one,
Yeah.
and then I watched Gundam Wing
Okay.
after, and I was like, I think I'm going to stick with the Gundam Wing
Yes.
as a middle schooler.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't watch Gundam Wing all
too
the way
existential.
through, but I watched it with my friend as a kid. So that leads us into our next question, kind of like the intro to the topic at hand. So today we're going to be talking about anime influence, and how you can kind of take these anime ideas and make them a part of your games. I have not done this very specifically. I haven't built a campaign around these ideas, but I've, you know, kind of sprinkled them in here and there. But we brought Zachary in because he has, you know, he's, I'm not going to say he's the expert, but he knows what he's talking about. He's done this before, and I'm sure he's got a lot of great ideas to share too. So, but yeah, to start off, how did you kind of get into anime? And then the follow-up is, how did you decide that you would want to blend anime ideas in with Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop games in particular?
So I grew up with Toonami after school.
Classic.
Watching Dragon Ball Z, watching so many things I feel like we're on that I can't even, like Card Captor Sakura, and like, you know, just random anime that I don't even really see anymore, just after school stuff. And then I kind of moved away from that because I was a little bit of a jock in high school, and so, you know, anime wasn't cool. And so then I'm in college. I had a surgery that kind of laid me out. I had to be on bed rest for a while, and my college roommate at the time was like, "Hey, I'm watching this show called Naruto. You should check it out." I'm like, "All right, I'll check it out. I'm interested. Yeah, okay." By the time that Rock Lee Gaara fight happened,
Nice.
I was in it. I was like, all right, yes, I'm finishing this show. So hooked back on that. That kind of hooked me back in. I watched Full Metal Alchemist, you know, to kind of further my love of just really good anime serials, you know. And I feel like we're in kind of this great golden age of anime. There's so much good stuff on right now. So yeah, I feel like me falling back in love with anime and D&D kind of happened around the same time in college, which was fun to kind of, you know, blend back in.
When did you decide to start blending those two things, anime and tabletops? Like, is that more of a recent idea with Warlock, or have you kind of always been doing it?
For most of the time when I was much younger, like my first little section of time playing D&D, I was a player. And then kind of post college is when I was like, you know, I'm just going to run something to get back into it. Cause, you know, I had friends that had interest in playing it, but had never played. And so, you know, how do people become DMs? They're like, I want to play D&D, but no one else knows how to play it. So
Yep.
I will run it. So pre-COVID, I decided to run for some friends Curse of Strahd. And I forget what I was watching, but it definitely influenced how I played Strahd, because I had just played Descent into Avernus, and I felt like one of my biggest beefs was how little Zariel shows up in the game.
Yeah.
You only meet Zariel at the very end, in according to the supplement. You
Right.
know? You only meet Zariel at the very end of the game, and it's, you know, she's on the cover. And so I said, you know, with Strahd, I really want to have Strahd be this kind of ever-present entity, you know, like a lot of other, I read some other stuff from veteran DMs that had played Strahd as kind of always there. And I kind of ended up turning Strahd into a little bit of an anime villain, showing up and, you know, find myself writing these monologues to just show up and mock the party. These long, you know, and I'd give them challenges to save one of the characters just to kind of mess with them. And I feel like that was kind of the start. I didn't really quite know that I was making him an anime villain, but, you know, I feel like by the time I gave, I forget which fight, I definitely gave him 2 health bars at one point and gave him a transformation. So it's like, oh, I think it's anime video game kind of influenced. And then once we started to kind of develop Warlock, it took off from there. We ended up finding so many elements of anime and D&D that just seemed to blend seamlessly to make a fun gaming experience.
Yeah, without too many spoilers, there's a lot of aspects of Warlock where it's like training and then fighting each other in kind of like a, not like death tournament style, right? But it's very much like a fighting tournament or that kind of idea. There's a lot of sparring and I feel like that's a fun way to kind of blend those things because you're using spells and you're using, kind of the idea of each of them taking turns and doing different stuff to each other. But you're also able to like do more fun stuff with them combining like some of their powers together to do new attacks or to like, prevent the other person from doing damage to them that's maybe not like baked into the 5e or, 2024 mechanics or rules, right? Like you have more flexibility when you're writing something like that. But I feel like that is kind of the fun of anime, right? It's like they just kind of like, the rules keep changing and they keep powering up and making new ways to do things. Like I think of when I was a kid watching like, Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! When there was like an actual game you could play and you'd play it and you'd be like, wait a sec, they do stuff on this show that's like nothing like you can actually do in the game, right? But that's kind of part of the fun. Like you're doing stuff, you're riffing, you're adding stuff that maybe doesn't, doesn't make sense in a mechanical sense, but you can kind of add to it.
And that was some of the most fun of like, of making the supplement. For example, one of the first item I thought of to add to the supplement was weighted training armor. The first 24 hours that you wear it, you are encumbered. You're essentially at like a level of exhaustion. But then after 24 hours, you're used to it. It's fine. And then when you doff that training armor, I forget all of the specific things, but it's your movement speed is increased. You get a +2 to your attacks. Your AC is higher, but it's only for X amount of rounds. And then when the combat is over, you are exhausted. And so it's kind of that vibe of a character could be wearing this and maybe they don't use it very often, but when the party is down and the big bad evil guy is looking like he's going to win and you can do the whole, I have to go all out, and you take off the armor and all of a sudden get a burst of speed. It's just, it's for me, it's about empowering players.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that's really important about this conversation is like, let's not get it twisted. As DMs, this conversation is going to happen for you. It's going to happen. You're going to have a player that watches an anime and comes to the table with an idea.
Yeah,
absolutely. And then you have to gauge how far can you take that idea? How well can you fold that idea? We have the episode recently of anachronisms. Like, how well can you fold that idea in at all based on the anime character and the things that are there in the world you've already created? It could totally go in. How well can you even conceptually make it? Because it's like, yeah, those are things that character can do, but we're level 5. So then you start navigating, navigating the smaller aspects of the character. So yeah, I feel like this is such an important thing because even thematically making your world feel like it. But I think what you hit on the best is it's the moments. It's the feeling, I think, that comes from anime that is not, there's something about it that is there that isn't necessarily always there in traditional fantasy stories. Like that's kind of the big thing that you almost gear it towards. You also typically have the maturity and coming of age story for everyone who's 15, which also seems wild to me because it's like, you can't drive a car, but you save the world. Yeah.
You're a demigod.
So that's always a struggle for me when I it just pops back into my head that I'm like, yeah, this character is definitely 15. So that's wild. But Yeah. So yeah, it's a conversation that, like, again, is inevitable. And when you go online, you basically, if you look up anything even remotely close to the topic at hand, you're going to get just every imaginable anime and how to build all of those characters in D&D.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything you want. And I think, like you were saying, you're going to encounter those players that watch sword art online and they're like, I want to make the main character. How do I do that? How do I feel like that in this game? And there's that balance of D&D is a team game. It's collaborative storytelling. And making sure that someone both feels empowered, but also not that they're the main character. And that's like, it's like the trickiest thing to balance, I'm sure, for like anyone that's experienced that.
Every game I've joined where I've been a player and it's like a bunch of randoms, it always seems like there's that one person who's like, I'm the main character, like I'm gonna take this over. I don't know what it is about the games with strangers, but it always seems that way. But yeah, it is absolutely a balance. Again, going back to Warlock, Zachary, I feel like you kind of helped nail that, because Nova, the main character, is the main character, but also she's got friends around her, and like all of them combined are what makes her strong. Like all of them combined are the ones who solve the problems together, right? It's never just like there might be like one or two moments where one of them does something exceptional that saves the others, but it's very much about the teamwork and about, the friendships. And I feel like the classic coming of age, those kinds of animes that I've watched, that's always kind of the core component, right? Like you've got your group, your squad, your team, whatever it is that you're all working together. And so long as everyone's kind of game to kind of help with that, even if it's just one player who wants the anime kind of ideas or dynamic, if the other ones are willing to kind of help them feel that way, and they're willing to contribute equally, and help the others feel important too. I feel like that's something you can definitely make work.
I feel like that's the great thing about, you were talking about, when you play with, strangers, that's harder to balance, but like that's what's great about playing. If you can find that kind of core group to play with, you get those moments of like, all right, this is their moment to shine. The DM has clearly worked in a moment for them to shine. I'm going to take that back burner support role and let them do their thing, because I know that at some point it will be me that I get that moment to shine. It's that tricky balance, but it can be done.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's important to make sure that everyone kind of recognizes that, and that you as the DM are passing out those opportunities equally. Like, especially if someone comes to you and says, ooh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, like above the table there, during the week or whatever, they're communicating to you that they have some ideas. Especially if one person starts to get really invested, I try to give equal, opportunities and ideas to the other players too, just to make sure that I'm trying to keep it balanced. And I think, that's probably the best way to go about it, is to try to give everybody else opportunities to shine equally like that. And if you're a player and you can recognize that happening, yeah, it's great to kind of give them the spotlight and then figure out a way that you can, get some spotlight as well later on.
It's recognizing that it's a collaborative game.
Yeah. Are there other tips or tricks or maybe like stories about how you've, identified ideas or themes and found good ways to weave them in to your prep or to your games?
Well, I feel like that's a big one, is letting players shine when you can. And I'd say just in general, I feel like communication outside of the game is great for that, where it's kind of, it's like if you're setting something up and kind of giving people an idea of what's kind of happening, if it's obviously not being like, this is what's going to happen next session, prepare accordingly, but
right. Kind of,
setting up being like, this is you can kind of see where things are going. Just keep that in mind. I always think that's super helpful. But one of the things, kind of going back to what we were talking about, I personally love a reoccurring villain. Someone that maybe doesn't show up super often, maybe doesn't show up for long, but I love giving the party someone to hate.
Yeah.
That personally does stuff to them. Not just someone, it's not just there is a lich that is done X, Y, and Z to the kingdom. It's like, no, this lich is the one that has personally done these things to the party and given them a good reason. And that could be worked through with backstory, or even just early on. You know, it's like I was saying, I feel like I love the main villain showing up when they're level 1 and seeing the adventurers as they're level 1 and saying, oh, they're nothing to me. They're not even worth my attention. You know, kill this NPC that's with them that they love.
Yeah.
You know, kidnap their dog, whatever, to get them kind of, you know, it's all about that like long game kind of arc for me. And that's not everybody, you know, some people love just doing the kind of hop from quest to quest. But if you are interested in more of the role playing aspect, the character aspect of the game, I love giving something for them to focus on long term that pays off later.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it can be hard to do depending on your player group. For instance, my players, I know, will like attack anything with the pulse if they think that it is like, you know, against them or working against them. And so, you know, I just have that in mind. And I try to do stuff like this where I introduce villains, but, you know, just know your players, I guess, and know what they will and won't try to do. You don't want to kill them all at level 1, but it is fun to threaten them like that and be like, you know, this person is so powerful that you're like nothing to them right now. And that kind of gives them even extra motivation. Another thing I feel like Warlock has done well is like the rivalries that you can have. And I feel like that's also a common anime thing, right? You've got the rival group or the rival person to you who's making fun of you. And, you know, like there can be some growing tension there and some fun payoff there too. But yeah, that's kind of another fun one to lean into.
What do you do about recurring villains or like recurring anything? Because like you said, 9 times out of 10, most parties are just like, they have hit points. That means it can die.
Yes.
Like, so, but just start. I mean, it's a thought exercise that I think is really important to just like start going through, because especially in anime, they don't die, especially if it's a rival or if it's the villain, depending on how campy the anime is. Like, that's the main conceit possibly of the whole show, is that this villain or rival will not die, because that's the crux for the next 10 episodes, is that like they need to be the foil to the main characters, like, so they can't ever die. Or is it just like that they present themselves? It's entirely possible that they are strong enough for them to just let the players hit them and just laugh, especially at the early stages of like, that is ridiculous. Or they're in a scenario where like, okay, magic exists. We're in a town. You hit me, you go to jail. Like, you can't just attack me. One, it did nothing but put you in jail, because like there are magical wards against that kind of behavior here. And all it did was just set off the alarms. And again, you're just in jail, and I'm a jerk. And I just went and I had them throw every book they own at you because I don't like you now. And that's going to keep happening. And the same with the rival thing is like, is it another school? Is it another faction? Is it another? You set that thing up and you just make it and layer the backstory in. What did your player put in there? Figure it out. Make something, make something up. That is the whole back and forth, of this rival town, of this rival school, of this rival, is it martial arts because it's your fighter? Is it wizard school because it's this? There's so many things that you can make recurring, but it does take work. Like, and I say that to immediately say it takes work, because you are going to need to like kind of always have tools to work yourself out of some scenario that you're not expecting to need to work yourself out of when it comes to recurring things, because they are going to box you in. They just will. Not that that's the intent of your players, but like they're trying to figure your story out as much as you're kind of figuring, the old adage of building the plane as you're flying it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So recurring is hard, but I think especially with the anime style, in the sense of having a really prominent villain or a really prominent rival. You need to really exercise that muscle of how do I make them not die?
And I had a conversation with someone a couple months ago, just kind of about like, what do you do if your players do better than you expected against a villain, you know? And it's like, you know, it's about having a way out for yourself where it's like they beat the bad guy way earlier than you expected, but also kind of having those anime tropes of like, it's a clone.
Right.
They beat him and he turns to sand and disappears. And there's a laughter in the distance saying like, ha ha ha, that was but a fraction of my power.
Right.
And then also, you know, I feel like a lot of kind of newer DMs are they try to pull punches too against their party. I always feel like people forget that beating the party doesn't mean killing them. It could be the party is defeated by this rival faction and they wake up in a barred carriage transported somewhere else. You know, they have to fight against, you know, their way out of this X, Y, and Z kind of situation where it's like, don't be afraid to have your players kind of hit that rock bottom, because then again, when they fight their way out, when they beat the people that originally defeated them the first time, it just gives that player satisfaction, you know?
Especially, you know, for sake of story, like it is fun to like, okay, you know, you pass out, but now you're in prison, or now you're like our prisoners, or now you're on the way to some gladiator ring, you know,
right.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do to further the story without just going TPK and saying, I guess we're going to start something else. Like you can always let that heighten the stakes. And then that just gives them more respect for the villain. If anything, they're like, oh, we have to be ready next time. You know, we can't go in guns blazing like we did last time, or else that's going to happen again. That is a fun way to kind of resolve that and keep everything moving forward. So you mentioned, Zachary, that you have created a supplement. I believe that you said you were also kind of writing a 2024 rules supplement as well.
Mm-hmm. Updating it all kind of to keep up with the story too.
Oh, yeah. Right. New powers, new abilities, that kind of thing, as they're leveling up in the story as well. That makes sense. So when you are doing something like this, I'm assuming part of it is homebrew, part of it is leaning upon what exists already. How do you make sure that everything's kind of balanced as you're writing this stuff? And yeah, what are some tips or tricks, or, what have you found when you're using this kind of anime lens to look through when you're creating stuff like this? What have you found works best for kind of building stuff custom like this?
Well, we did a lot of playtest, just grabbing whoever wanted to make a character. We did some at first level. We did some at 3rd, 5th, 15th level.
Yeah.
Kind of the spectrum of where you might play in a campaign, and letting them just kind of go wild with it. And I remember having kind of 2 kind of metrics in which we gauged these play testers, and it was ease of use and enjoyability, and in a sense of just like, did the class features make sense? Was it easy to kind of grasp everything with a little bit of prep time? And did you have fun? And sometimes people would say, oh, this class feature was a little confusing. It felt a little clunky using it, but I had fun with this. And so, we would meet the next day and do a call and say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board with this. And so it was really, really fun, just kind of fine tuning what worked and what didn't. And I feel pretty good with where we landed with the first version of the supplement. Even people have given us more feedback since then, mostly just kind of hey, it'd be cool if you did this. It's like, oh, we should have thought of that. Having this in there. Yeah. It's just all about kind of the best lab is just doing it, rather than just looking at it on paper. And just because there were things that we would think were flawless, they'd get into the hands of players and they'd say, oh, can I do this with it? Like, oh, shoot. Yes, you should be able to. And the tricky thing, the tricky thing is just keeping it balanced, but that's almost more of a math than an art.
Yeah.
Making sure they're not doing too much damage or too little.
Right. Yeah. That's probably the thing that I've found hardest in homebrewing stuff. And Neal has mentioned this before in past episodes. Like, as the DM, especially if you're just like homebrewing for your home game, you should always reserve the right to adjust stuff on the fly or adjust stuff, later on as you're kind of building it together, right? And that's exactly what playtesting is, right? It's design it, test it, tweak it, test it, tweak it, test it, however many times you need to before you feel like you've hit that sweet spot. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's definitely not the easiest thing. And, it's always going to be swingy because the dice, but yeah, there's definitely a sweet spot. And I feel like, so long as your player and you are willing to work together, you can definitely find that right balance and make it fun.
Yeah, one of the important things, like, I probably have to say this in the intro, so we lead in with it because we're 45 minutes in, and I'm saying it now. One of the important things is this whole conversation is about putting anime elements in D&D.
Yeah,
if you want to play anime role playing, there's other games for this.
That's true.
Right. I'm gonna throw that out there. There's games where your dice explode and you get to roll them again, and then they explode some more, and you roll them again, and you're just doing fistfuls of dice, and you're doing crazy things, and you're doing this, and you're doing that, and you have the powers, and you have the things, and you have. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're still in the 5e system.
Yeah,
we're still we're like was mentioned, adapting it to the 2024 rule set. Like it's 5e plus anime elements, and so it still has to work inside of that core system while adding certain pieces, because if you stretch the outer limits of that box too far, things will break. Like it's just going to snap, because certain pieces of this math just can't go as far as you may want them to go, especially if you're trying to, how many levels of that they're saying, did you really want a super? Because it's not going to work. When the other guy is Krillin and you're going Super Saiyan, so on, depending on what color you think your hair is going to get, that discrepancy, and the other guy is bald, the discrepancy gets to be too far. So the balancing issues will definitely be there. So one of the other key things that I think about a lot with this is really digging, and this is hard because I feel like it's the second layer question, which is always a very difficult thing to really get the essence of what someone enjoys about something. Trying to find out why they like the character enough to pull that out to have it represented in the game. Because I don't feel like a person's first answer is probably the real core of what draws them to a character. If it were, if super low hanging fruit, because I pulled up a document that I have an old document, it was totally free because you can't use this. You can't sell this. It's Naruto 5e. And so it's a whole thing where they tried to fold it in. It's very free because it is very copywritten.
Lots of, yeah.
Yeah. Just straight, just images pulled. And it's, the first thing is the fan content. Wizards of the Coast fan content policy and everything like that.
Right.
But that's to say, if my favorite character is Naruto, that the anime is large enough and there's so many aspects to that character. Okay, why? And so then asking that player and trying to drill down far enough to see why, that character means something to them, and then trying to give that to them at the table, rather than just trying to figure out mechanically, what does sage mode look like when they're at the table? That might not matter to them at all. Is it the Rasengan? Is it a move? Is it a feeling? Is it is it the rivalry with Sasuke? What about the character is the thing that makes it important? Is it, is it the feel of the anime? Is it the feel of the rivalry? Is it the feel of the villain and what that kind of back and forth is? So that is by far what I have realized over time is one, the most important, and of course, one of the most difficult things is to figure out what's being, what's being said without being said and of course, it may be that you never figure it out. And at that point, you're almost, you're someone's D20 therapist at that point, because you're trying to almost figure out okay, so what about you? Are you projecting into the character that you're seeing in yourself? Very difficult, but again, super important.
I mean, that's you kind of tapped into that. That's an old like therapy thing where it's like if you're trying to, I think it's for like if you're trying to like if you're trying to like stop doing something, it's like, well, what about that thing makes you feel good? So it's like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like how can you replicate that? And I think that's a big part of it. It's like, you're totally right about how there are systems that are just anime based. And it's like so many people for what X, Y, and Z don't want to do a different system. And so it's about finding what feels good in this system.
Okay. My cheat code. I think I figured it out for us. Ask them what their favorite episode is. So if they tell me it's a Naruto and they tell me that it's a certain character, follow-up question is, okay, then just without any other context, without any more digging, ask them what their favorite episode is. Just start
brilliant.
And go watch that episode. If you have follow-up questions after that, maybe dig in further, but start there. I think that'll give you a lot of context about maybe why. Yeah, because for Naruto, it's Asuma. It's the death of Asuma.
Such a great arc.
Yeah, screw it. It's old enough.
It's like 15 years old.
Spoilers.
I don't know when that episode came out, but it was quite a while ago.
One last question from me, Zachary, and then we'll probably wrap up with some homework here. The last kind of thing I'm wondering is, how have you balanced between like doing what sounds fun, but also being respectful to the genre and to, its history and to where it comes from? I guess what's kind of your advice there?
We say for Warlock that it's got the anime flair.
Yeah.
Not kind of leaning into that whole, it's like, it's not anime. It's a D&D audio drama with anime vibes. And I feel like that's the thing, it's all artists don't steal. They find inspiration in things. And so it's being respectful, especially with a lot of like, cultural things too.
Right.
You don't want to, you just never know what people's history is with stuff at the table, especially too, where it's just maintaining a respect. And I think kind of keeping it's like Neal, you were saying, it's like, what do you find joy in this aspect of anime, of these characters, of these stories? And you can kind of find that story in D&D, in whatever story you want to create, while respecting the source material of it. That almost makes it better because it gives you your own ownership on what you're creating.
Yeah.
Where, for example, people always tell us when they listen to our show, they're like, oh, this reminds me of this, and this reminds me of this, and this reminds me of this. But it's not enough that it doesn't feel like we're copying it. It just gives people it reminds people of the feelings they had when they watched this show, this episode. And I feel like that's a great kind of blueprint for creating your own D&D story with that kind of anime inspiration of evoking those emotions, those feelings, the feelings of those characters, rather than just simply taking the plot of Jujutsu Kaisen and setting it in Ravenloft. I don't know,
Yeah. All right. I like it.
I think it's important that you're not doing a direct one-to-one, especially if you're doing something that is publicly released like that. You're just going to get in hot water right away. If it's your private home game and everyone is super comfortable with what's happening, more power to you.
Right.
I'm not like, who's to stop you at that point? Everyone's comfortable at the table. You're comfortable running it. You feel like you're executing that kind of one-to-one well. That's a heavy lift as well. Like, you're trying to do Naruto directly at your table. That's scary. That's
a lot of work.
It's the same thing that becomes just as scary when you have people that have been playing in the Forgotten Realms for 30 years and you go to Waterdeep and the person knows what's on the street next, like the next street over.
They like
the
know
next
that.
three or four. Yeah, they know the streets, the shops, and everything else. It's the same vibe. It's just a different setting. So it's hard when that kind of thing happens, when it is a true one-to-one. If it is publicly released, I would caution strongly against such a choice. So that 1-to-1. So then, and that's why we frame the conversation the way we have, as anime as a generality, like to the point where out on the fringes of what is even considered anime, like the Castlevania stuff that's on Netflix, technically not anime. If we want to get real off in the weeds, is Solo Leveling anime? I'm not 100% sure because it's based on a manhwa, not a manga. Like, I don't know. Is that technically anime? I'm not sure if a different word's supposed to be used. But so like, that's why a really generalized term for the certain feelings that are evoked from this type of media, and you're trying to take those elements and fold them into what D&D is to start evoking different feelings and different storylines. So like, yes, broad strokes.
Something that's been I've loved going on to while writing the show is tvtropes.com.
Yes.
And going into the anime and just looking at the tropes, and you can see just how many animes will lean into any obscure trope. The like enemies to friends trope. Every anime has that. The two rival characters using an attack against each other that clashes.
Yes.
So many. And it's like you can just use these tropes.
You have to.
You use these tropes, and then that's what people are like, oh, it reminds me of the Rasengan versus the Chidori. But it also reminds me of Goku's Kamehameha versus the Gallic Gun, Vegeta, or, Cell and Gohan. Like, there's just so many different tropes that are just so broadly used that people can think of individual examples of, but also not a specific, like, this is owned by this one. Because it's like, I was just talking to someone about the Barbarian Rage could absolutely be flavored as a transformation.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to make it the Super Saiyan transformation, or do you want to make it the Sailor Moon transformation? Whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? Just like,
yes,
like anime to a fault can be so predictable and so generic at times, but also there's a sense of security in that,
Right. Yeah, people like it when they guess what's going to happen next. It makes them feel like they're part of the story that much more. Yeah. And, when your players guess something and it's not going to happen, maybe it is going to happen now, because that's fun too. Like, it's a payoff. Like, oh, you guys figured out my plan. That's
like, jot that down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, kind of going back to the whole thing at the beginning, just, it's like, when you think about a commoner's not even a level 1 and they stroll up at level 5 and can cast spells that these commoners have only heard of. It's like they kind of are anime characters. They kind of are the group of the sorcerers from Jujutsu Kaisen that can do all these special things. And I think there's something to just kind of leaning into that vibe.
Yeah, they wander into town and everyone knows, like, oh, either steer clear or like, they're here to protect us or whatever it happens to be, but they have that notoriety.
Because you can kind of make the same sense of the tropes of like a Marvel movie.
Sure.
If you want to get into the world ending scenarios of your characters being level 15 and stopping a lich that wants to, take every soul in the world to do whatever. And it's like, it's just about leaning into those tropes of the superhero movies that just evoke those very simple but very satisfying emotions. It's when you're playing with the two action figures and it's the character you thought that was dead comes back and saves someone at the last minute. It's those moments at the table, and it's like, it's those rolling a natural 20 moments and it's that shared connection. I was talking with one of my DMs that ran a game for years for me. It was just, we were reminiscing about a story, about a moment that we thought was so funny that it didn't happen. It's not a real event, but we all have this collective memory of it happening. And I'm sure it's funny because it's theater of the mind. We all have a different recollection of what it looked like, but we all had this shared moment of this thing happening that we can all joke about.
Yeah. It's real for you, right? That's the fun part.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, those are fun. It's always fun to talk to your players and like reminisce about the really fun stuff that's happened in the past, stuff that makes you laugh or cry or whatever it is.
Makes you feel good as a DM.
Yes, it does. It does.
It's like, oh, you guys had so much fun.
It adds to the fire for sure. Last night, I had a few different players text me afterward. They're like, "Oh man, I'm loving this new game. You know, it's like it's giving me some new energy." And I'm like, "Yes, that's what we're going for. Renewed love for what we're doing."
That's the best.
So to wrap things up, we love to talk about some homework for our listeners, and homework entails like shows to watch, media to consume, stuff to read. So anything coming to mind for you to give them some inspiration, some ideas on how to integrate anime ideas into their games or anything like that?
Well, if you want to go old school anime, Record of Lodoss War is the archetypal anime D&D television show. It is essentially the creator of that show had a campaign in D&D and he said, let's animate this. And they did. That's it. It is an old school. I think it's AD&D television show. So if you want the true kind of anime D&D vibe, that's a great one. Recently though, if you haven't watched Delicious in Dungeon or Dungeon Meshi, that one was a lot of fun. And that one's a dungeon crawl, but it leans more on the lighter, kind of more like RP side of things. Basically, it's kind of have you all seen that one? It's basically every episode is they fight a monster, they beat the monster, they cook the monster.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard it's pretty interesting and fun.
It's fun. It's fun what they do with it. So it's kind of, if you like things on the little more episodic, kind of like lighthearted ish compared to some other things, that's a fun one to kind of get some ideas, because there is that kind of overall arc of the story.
Very monster of the week.
Yeah. So it's like, if you're not looking to do something that's quite so long term, I feel like that's a fun kind of anime D&D inspiration. They're in the different part of the dungeon each week and they experience different things. And so I feel like so you get the new and the old.
Ragnarok is an older one. It's from 2004. It's got some very D&D vibes. I mean, solo leveling is not my advice for how you should run a campaign, because it's literally in the name.
If you're running a one-on-one campaign.
But it is a lot of like really interesting D&D style stuff, because like basically like you have to become a D&D character to fight the monsters. Normal humans and missiles and weapons and guns and tanks don't do anything to the monsters. You basically have to become a D&D style character to go into dungeons and do things. So there's a lot of characters and armors and weapons and things. And then it shows, you get a game system inside of there that you're kind of observing the main character interact with. So then it also gives ideas from that perspective. And that's a newer one. My big thing is find something that's an ensemble cast. Like, solo leveling has a ton of ideas, but they're ideas. It's not demonstrating for you how to kind of fold some of those ideas directly into your game. I watched all of Sailor Moon because I was used to waking up at a certain time as a kid to watch Beast Wars, and it was replaced by Sailor Moon. And I was like, good enough for me. And I watched all 200 episodes as I was getting ready for school. But there's five sailors. Oh. And so like, that's what my memory tells me. And so like, it's an ensemble cast of them all working together and having different personalities and different skills, and those skills all working with each other, potentially all coming together to do something. And so like that, finding those anime that have those tropes and specifically trying to find the ones that don't have a main character. They have a main cast. Like that's the thing that I think you should really look for when trying to find one to kind of focus on. And luckily there are also so many that are 1 season, 2-3 seasons, something like that. And so you can get in, get out, get the feel for it, get all these ideas, and then you're done, which is nice.
True.
You're like, oh, I'd love to go watch One Piece. There's 1,000 episodes. And I'll be like, well, that ship has literally and figuratively sailed away on this guy, because I don't want to start watching 1,000 episodes of something.
It's a behemoth. I'm with you. I've only seen the live action, but my friends are like, just read it. I'm like, I don't have time to sit and read that much.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's why I love Dungeon Meshi, where it's like every character has a kind of a skill, and they each get their moments to shine.
Yeah,
and it's there arguably isn't really a main character.
I have a few recommendations here. Number one, in an RPG / ensemble cast vein, Square Enix games, so anything from Chrono Trigger to Final Fantasy games to Kingdom Hearts games. Good ways to kind of give you fantasy vibes and like teams, but also these kind of anime concepts. So, odds are that you've played one of those games and are familiar with those. And so that's always a good way to look at it or to kind of get some inspiration. Fire Emblem. Then Neal mentioned there are other games to play out there that kind of give you the vibes for a specific anime that you might be interested in. There's a ton of mecha TTRPGs. So if you're into Gundam or anything like that, there's a bunch. Lancer's kind of the new hotness right now. That's definitely worth a look. I have some friends who have a podcast called Fetty Scum where they're basically doing like a TTRPG and they're like building it as they go, which is in the Gundam universe, which is pretty fun. It's definitely not family friendly, so know that going in, but there's some funny stuff in there, and that's worth a look. There's also another TTRPG called Orbital Blues, which is kind of going for it's going for the Cowboy Bebop vibes. Definitely worth a look if you are interested in something like that. I feel like that would be kind of fun. Again, like a very short series, all things considered, right? There's 20-something episodes in the whole thing. A good way to kind of explore everyone's backstory a little bit, get some interesting closure, whether it's good or bad. No spoilers, but, getting some closure for your characters and telling interesting stories about interesting people. Those are my recommendations.
And, of course, the most important question is, where can people go to find everything you're doing on the World Wide Web?
You can find our show wherever you get your podcasts. But we also have a website, warlockpod.com. But we are on all major podcast apps, websites, Spotify, Apple. Just Warlock. I both love and regret the name Warlock. Having it just be one word. I'm like, ooh. Thankfully, no other podcasts are named Warlock. But when you type in Warlock into Google, actually now I feel like we finally kind of got a little bit of a foothold where if you type Warlock podcast, it pops up, like at first when we launched, I was like, oh no, there's podcasts talking about warlocks.
Right.
What do we do? And now I feel like we're 3 years in, we've got a decent, listener base that's what pops up first, thankfully. But yeah. Pro tip, if you're starting a podcast, pick something super unique.
Yeah, Dungeon Master's Block is evocative of what the show is about, but the word Dungeon Master is just everywhere, and so our SEO struggles a little bit too, but that's okay. Because what you can do is you can go review Warlock, and you can review Dungeon Master's Block and push them higher up the searches in your podcast platform of choice, and help us out, and help your friends out too. I cannot recommend Warlock enough. It has been so much fun to listen to. As I was saying, I have just caught up to the most recent episode on my way home from my home game last night, and a lot of crazy stuff went down that I am going to ask Zachary about after we hit stop recording here. But it's really fun. Things are ramping up, and I can't wait to see where this finale is going. You were mentioning you're close to kind of writing that and wrapping that all up, so I'm excited to see where it all ends up.
I don't know if people are ready for this one.
Awesome.
Like I say that, and it seems like it's just gonna be a season finale. No, I don't know. I'm a little nervous, honestly, but I know that's very ominous. But yeah.
It does sound ominous. You're going to have to do some spin-offs, I guess. Anyway, thanks so much for coming on. We've had a blast, and we'll definitely have to have you on in the future and chat more about running games and about anything else that comes to mind.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'll come and I'll just pop in and talk with you guys. It was a blast.
We just want to thank Zachary again for coming on, spending some time with us, and talking about, certainly, a lot of experience in adding that anime flair to a D&D game. And of course, if you want to listen to Zachary do that in real time, you can always head over and check the show notes for a link over to Warlock Pod.
As always, if you'd like to hear more from us and you want to stay in tune for announcements about the show, you can follow DM's Block on Twitter. You can like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Blue Sky or X or Instagram or TikTok. You can find us in most of those places at DMS_block or the whole word Dungeon Masters Block. You can also email us if you have any questions or you want to tell us about your fun anime-inspired games at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com.
And of course, if you see fit and you want to leave us a rating or review at your podcatcher of choice, you can head over there. Is it Apple Podcasts? Is it Podchaser? Is it Podbean? Is it Podmean? I don't know
Good pods.
anymore. There's good pods, bad pods, ugly pods, everything in between. I genuinely do not know what you are using. I'm using Overcast. Who knows? Leave us a rating and review, and certainly let us know, and we'll read it out on air.
The Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network. Check out other amazing shows like Dungeons and Dragons and Daughters, Titans of Altera, The Bad Venture Club, and Knocked Prone, and Knocked Prone's brand new show, We're More Than D&D Characters, where Neal has already featured as one of their guests.
And as always, thank you for listening to the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we come to talk about the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing gods,
Killing anime characters,
and lowering the egos of everyone else at the table.
I'm DM Derrick saying plot twists, not plot holes.
I'm DM Neal saying good night, good luck, and keep on dungeon mastering.
It's not inspiration, it's not wisdom, and it's bad advice.
Hey, so just like any other anime, if your players don't like it when you're done with the ending, just write another one that's worse. Just watch Evangelion if you don't know what I mean.
Yeah, most of my campaign endings have also ended with me scribbling furiously on paper and hoping that it makes sense.
Oh, hey everyone, you didn't like that? I bet you won't like this either. Blech.
Goodbye.